Malicious compliance section number 2. So I'm not allowed to sleep when I want. Okay then. This happened when I was living in a dorm. I explained to my roommates that because of my insomnia I can't sleep whenever I want. I have to follow a strict routine, and I sleep from 23 to 7. I ask them not to make too much noise when I'm trying to sleep. Previously, one of them decided it would be okay to play a song loudly at 23 while I was trying to sleep, which is why I felt like a conversation was necessary. They did not like this, so they complained to the person in charge, who told me that the sleeping hours are from 24 to 6, and if I dislike that, I can leave, but I don't have the right to ask anyone to be quiet before 24 or after 6. All right then. My roommates tend to sleep from 2 to 7, and also during the day from 15 to 17. Now, according to the rules, I have every right to be loud during 15 to 17, right? And that's exactly what I did. Every day, when they wanted to sleep, I played music or talked to my phone or invited people over. They couldn't sleep anymore. So eventually, they decided that they really need some sleep. And since I won't let them sleep during the day, they chose to sleep at 23, when I would also be asleep. But I wasn't done. You see, they already ruined my routine, so I can't sleep anymore. And keep in mind, I still have the right to be noisy from 23 to 24, and that's exactly what I did. Eventually, we had another fight, and they asked me to stop and promise to be quiet when I want to sleep. No one bothered my sleep after that. Edit. Just to clear some things up. No, I didn't think of a solution before going to college. I didn't have insomnia before going to college. My first semester in the dorm was so terrible that I ended up with anxiety disorder that eventually caused my insomnia. Yes. I did continue living in that dorm, despite knowing how difficult it would be with my condition. Why do they have more of a right to stay there than I do? Not everyone is rich enough to get a house. No, I'm not a terribly nice person. No, I didn't use earplugs. I can't sleep with something in my ear. Yes, I should have been given a single room. I had a note from my doctor, but the few single rooms in our dorm were for the students who knew some important people in our college. It was a known fact. They didn't care about my problem. No, I don't understand why it was so wrong of me to expect people to remain quiet while I sleep, but it was also so wrong of me to make noise while other people sleep. Double standard much? So I'm supposed to be quiet for people but never expect people to do the same for me? No, I don't think I could find any compromise. I literally cannot sleep any other way. So what would the compromise even be? Okay, how about I only sleep 3 nights a week? Is that what you have in mind? Throw your receipt at me? Have fun picking it up from the trash. I worked at a hardware store about 7 years ago. We sold big gas bottles, 11 kilograms or 24 infinitum units of LPG, and if you brought in an empty bottle, we would give you a filled one in exchange for a price. How it worked was that the customer came to the checkout, expressed their wishes on what kind of bottle they needed and paid. The gas bottles were given to them outside the store at a loading station for bigger goods. The checkout machine would print automatically 2 receipts, one normal receipt, and one the customer would hand over to a worker in the loading station outside the store as a proof they paid for the gas. By law, we had to always verbally offer a receipt to every customer. This is to prevent selling things under the table, and a cashier could get fined if they didn't offer a receipt. So a lot of customers automatically deny having the receipt and just tell you no receipt thanks before you even open your mouth. Some take the receipt but just drop it directly at the trash bins right after the checkout. In comes the villain, a middle-aged man who wants to exchange his empty bottle to a filled one. He's being a generic a-hole and barely acknowledged me, the cashier in my mid-20s. He pays and takes the receipts, he crumbles them up and throws it at me. He said he didn't need a receipt. Working in customer service was not a peak career point, and as every sane person knows, customers are often wrong. However, never ever had I been disrespected so much that someone would throw a piece of trash at me. In kicks the malicious compliance, I knew the dude needed the receipt to get what he paid for, so I took the receipt ball he had made, dropped it quietly to the big trash bin next to me, and started helping the next customer in line. The disrespectful man took a few steps away, realized his mistake, and said he actually needs the receipt back. I was busy already with the next customer. So with the brightest smile and happy tone, I said, "Sure, it's in here," and handed the trash bin to him. Divine Justice had also arranged it so that we had cleaned the checkout floors quite recently and emptied the dust into the trash bin. He had to handpick his receipt ball from the middle of gray dust, old chewing gums, and whatever yucky stuff had ended up in the huge bin. I'm glad to say the a-hole turned a lot nicer and lost his demeaning attitude as he was shuffling through the trashes. Teacher wouldn't listen, so the entire class complied and he got fired. At bottom, this happened in the early 2000s in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the third high school in our city and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job, but had zero people skills and was extremely abrasive towards students. He had previously taught university and could not wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they were so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day, at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups, and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes, and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Intro to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, this would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. No one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him, "This is an intro class. None of us have learned anything like this before." And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing. Ask us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berated us for not being prepared. At every class, he would say, "I thought you all were musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in this class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed, and seemed to think we were his prize students and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed his class. A few months go by and we are at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint, but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing, and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early, so that, on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party instead. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us have the same period after his class together as well. That class was a P English, and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with a class party in music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test, he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We try to tell him all the issues with this plan. We aren't allowed to leave campus without permission. Slips It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student who left campus for lunch got hit by a car and was killed. We will not get back in time for second period, which is a final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus. What if there is an emergency and we are unaccounted for because we aren't even at the school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP. And if we wanted to join him, that was our choice. But if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the next, that there was no class and no teacher. Without talking about it to each other, the 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final, due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that this final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. It took forever to get there because of construction, and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing, and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The 4 of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with a teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have if we had the full 87 minutes. But we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect our overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation, or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time towards the admins. "Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They are old enough to drive. What's the problem?" The English teacher, who I actually adore and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how they could continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers, so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction, since the 6 of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically have us a choice to go with him or stay. But I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. TLDR, jerk teacher told us to leave school with him for class party. We complied and the district fired him. Thieving bully demands I take him home in order to give him my fundraising earnings. I comply and it works out beautifully for me. I was in middle school in the 90s. I loved growing up then, and even though there were gangs in my area, I generally avoided trouble. One of my classes had this big field trip planned and they had us selling chocolates to raise money for our trip. I was pretty good at it and was selling at a good rate. I would take the bus, public transportation, to school, and my stop was about 2 blocks from my home. I got off at my stop one day with my box of chocolates, and there was this older kid, around 16 to 17, pretty big for his age, hanging out there. He saw me and came towards me. This guy's clearly a gangbanger. Payaso comes up to me and says, "Hey homie, where you from?" He was asking what gang I was from. It's not the first time I get challenged like this, so I just reply, "I don't bang, man. I'm just a junior high kid." Payaso looks at my box of chocolates and takes it from me. "What's this?" I tell him it's nothing. It's something for school. He opens the box and sees a bunch of dollars in there. He grabs the bills, around $15, my sales for the day, and takes a bunch of chocolates as well. "Tomorrow you're going to give me $20 more, If you don't, we are going to have a real fucking problem. I walk away feeling scared and pissed off. I realized I'm going to have to pay back the lost money from my birthday money. And I definitely didn't want to give this guy any more money. I think about it and decide I'll get off at a later bus stop. From now on, and walk a little more. Just to avoid this guy, the next day this is what I do. I stuff my box in my backpack just in case, and I exit about 2 stops later. I don't see the guy and think I have solved my problem. Then I get to the liquor store, block away from home, and who do I see? But this overgrown idiot Payaso. "Hey man, you didn't forget about me, did you?" I said. "Look man, I don't have any money right now. I don't even have my chocolates. I left them at home." I shouldn't have said that. "Okay, let's go to your house and you're going to give me the money or something else if you don't got it." I begin getting real nervous. My mom is at work and my grandma's home. I definitely don't want to bring him home with her there. I glance at him and notice the tattoos on his arms. At this point, I saw the perfect opportunity for malicious compliance. I tell him, "I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't you just let me go, man?" Payaso grabs me by the collar and says, "I tell you what to do and you fucking do it, you understand?" I nod my head and tell him to follow me. Now it's time to give a little background. My neighbor, that lived in the house next to mine, was a veterano, a veteran of one of the biggest, most notorious gangs in the city. He was in his 40s and a real chill dude. He loved my grandma because she would often share plates of food she made with him and his wife, and he was fond of me because I taught his 8-year-old boy how to play baseball. His son had a disability, a problem with one of his legs, so most other kids wouldn't play with him, but I often did. Let's call my neighbor OG. OG always had a bunch of guys over at his house. He made sure they never caused problems and they were all respectful towards my family in particular. Back to Payaso, the tattoos on his arms. I realized he was from the same gang as OG. I have a big smile as I'm walking home and Payaso asks me, "Why are you smiling, pendejo idiot?" I say, "No reason," and keep walking home. As we get closer, I see a bunch of guys hanging out at OG's house. Payaso narrows his eyes, then smiles as he recognizes some of the guys. We get to OG's house, and Payaso says, "Wait here, pendejo, let me talk to my homies." OG is sitting on his porch, and Payaso starts greeting some of the guys, and then heads towards OG and greets him in a reverential manner. OG notices me and says my name. "Hey OP, what's up?" Payaso turns to look at me, and I say, "Payaso told me to wait here. I have to go home and give him money." OG stands up and says, "Why do you have to give him money?" I say, "Because he told me yesterday at my bus stop that the $15 and chocolates he took from me wasn't enough, and I had to give him more today." Payaso begins to speak. "You know this kid OG?" OG gives him the scariest look I've ever seen and tells him to shut the fuck up. OG looks back at me and asks, "Is this from the chocolates you are selling?" I said, "Yes." OG asks me how many chocolates I have left to sell. I say about 50. He tells me not to worry. Payaso is going to pay me for the 50 I have left, plus 20 for the day before, and an extra 50 for my trouble. He tells me to keep whatever else I sell. He tells me to go home and Payaso would be back later with my money. About an hour later, there is a knock on my door, and Payaso has an envelope and says, "Here's $120, little homie. I fucked up, I'm sorry. Do you have Nintendo? I brought you some games." I just stood there stunned and thinking how I never would have guessed that getting robbed had so many benefits. I didn't see Payaso too many times after that, but whenever I did, he would wave at me and never bothered me again. Want me to take all my stuff and leave? No problem. This was a couple months ago back in May. I had been living in an apartment with 3 other roommates, so 4 of us total, for about 8 months. We are all women in our 20s. I barely interacted with my other roommates at all. Just between our jobs and classes, we never saw each other. We all had our own rooms as well. For some context, on May 5th, my fiancé and I were planning to move into a new apartment together. So by the evening of the 4th, I had just about all of my belongings packed up. More on that later. Though I barely interacted with my roommates, I felt like we coexisted well, and we never fought or argued about anything, except for some very minor instances with Vicky and Kara. Those two were friends, and Vicky was definitely the messiest of the four of us living there. She would leave her clothes in the dryer for days, pile dishes in the sink for more than a week before cleaning them, and often forget food in the fridge until it would rot. Now, the malicious compliance, as I had mentioned earlier, I had packed most of my belongings already, but technically not everything. The four of us all moved into the apartment at about the same date, but I moved in a few days earlier than the others. This means I had bought a lot of the communal items myself. I was planning to leave these out of kindness despite them being worth approximately $400. However, once I got that text from Kara, I decided I would in fact take all of my stuff and leave. These communal items included all trash cans in the whole apartment, $100, the Wi-Fi router, $150, a large metal shelving rack, probably the one that hurt the most, $150. The shelving rack was likely the most devastating loss for them since they had tons of stuff. For reference, the kitchen had 10 cupboards and 8 drawers, of which I used 2 cupboards and 1 drawer to store my items. The cupboards I used were also the ones above the microwave and the fridge, since I am the tallest and wanted to be considerate. All the rest of the cupboards, drawers, and the entire metal rack, which had 5 large shelves, were filled to the brim with my roommate's stuff. Essentially, there was absolutely no way they'd be able to fit it in the amount of space I left behind without buying another rack or putting it on the counter and floor. I was careful to keep all their stuff from the rack organized and neat when I removed it, and everything from the rack completely covered the counters, kitchen table, and coffee table in the living room. I moved out peacefully, with all my belongings the next day, and have been happy in my new apartment with my fiancé. A few days after moving out, Vicky texted in the group chat that, FYI, the Wi-Fi isn't working anymore. I wonder why. And at that point, I left the chat. I've wondered how long it took Kara to realize that it actually was never me that was making messes in the apartment. But I guess I'll never know. TLDR. My roommate was very rude to me right before I was planning to move out. So I took all of the communal belongings I had planned to leave behind. Trash cans, Wi-Fi router, and a storage shelf they heavily relied on. Told to do what I have to do. I am a disabled veteran, and at the time this actually happened, I was solely depending on walking stick. I could not walk more than 10 feet maximum without assistance. I was asked by a friend to be a bridesmaid at her wedding. She quickly proved herself to be a bridezilla from hell, and everything had to meet her vision. Everything had to fall within her very rigid scope of what the aesthetic should be. She made a couple of what she claimed were innocent comments about my walking stick. I offered multiple times not to be a bridesmaid and would assist in any other way I could help. She refused every offer and insisted I had to be a bridesmaid. Then I heard from another close friend, and also a bridesmaid, that she was very upset that I was insisting on using my walking stick. She made a comment saying that she was just going to hide it, and then I would just have to go without it. Looking at the mutual friend's face, when she said that she tried to laugh it off as a joke. Well, there was no doubt in my mind that she was going to try to have my walking stick go missing, so I made arrangements. Sure enough, they have the wedding rolls around, and while getting hair and makeup, my walking stick disappears. I was not happy, and told everyone I have to have it back. I cannot walk down the aisle without it. The bride insisted that they didn't know where it was and they looked everywhere and I was just gonna have to make do, I said. So after you joked about taking my walking stick, it goes missing, and you want me to make do? Her exact words were, "You'll just have to do what you can do to get up the aisle." Cue malicious compliance. I texted my boyfriend, he went out to the car and brought in mobility scooter that I had rented just in case I needed it. I had him put it out of sight, but where we could get to it easily. And then he or the other bridesmaids physically supported me. We made our way to the back of the hall for the start of the ceremony. The bride, who had been talking to her father and not paying attention, did not see the scooter until she started to walk up the aisle. And there are her 3 bridesmaids, 2 standing tall and me sitting on the most hideous-looking multicolored with sparkles mobility scooter I could find. If looks could kill, she would have planted me. Within seconds of the ceremony ending, my walking stick had been found. She and her new husband brought it over to me and told me it had been found and I could get that god-awful scooter back out to the car. I mustered up a tear and told her I was so sorry, but I was in so much pain from having to try to walk without my walking stick that there was no way I would be able to go without the scooter. I am very proud to say that the scooter is in over 90% of her wedding photos. Hand over all my tasks so you can get rid of me? Okay, not sure if this is exactly 1,000, but here goes. A few years back, I was the IT contracts and supplier manager at a large company, been there 25 plus years and had a lot of corporate knowledge, having worked in multiple roles over that time. Also was very well paid due to length of tenure and experience at the company. A new a-hole boss gets hired and proceeds to get rid of people he doesn't like and hires his buddies into various roles. The workplace culture took a nosedive pretty quickly. I knew my time was limited as I wasn't in his inner circle. Seeing the writing on the wall, I started looking for and applying for other roles. The a-hole boss gets me in their sights and decides to get rid of me, looking to move one of his recently hired buddies to my specialized role. He doesn't even understand what I do, needing a lot of technical knowledge combined with contract and legal. He tells me he wants to move me onto an upcoming project and to finish off what I am currently working on and not take on any new work. Through all my contacts across the company, I knew there was no new project or even significant budget for one, but I'll do what I'm told. I wrap up my work and tell him I'm ready for the project. He says sit tight, it's not far away, and don't start anything else. So I sit at my desk, applying for other jobs and waiting. One of the jobs I applied for comes through and get an offer on a Friday morning. That same afternoon, the a-hole boss comes around and says, the project isn't happening, and as you have nothing else on your plate, we will have to let you go. Yahtzee. I know there is heaps of work backed up and the shit is going to hit the fan soon when contracts aren't renewed, services canceled, etc. I also know my employment contract, and they will have to pay a generous redundancy because the boss told HR my role isn't required anymore. I say, okay, I guess you will have to pay me a redundancy too? Sure, he says, not knowing what he has agreed to. So I go through the redundancy process and at the same time accept the offer of the new job. Come my last day, I happily accept the $200,000 payout. His face goes pale when he hears of the amount because it comes out of the team's budget. Walk out the door and into the new job the day after. Love my new job, less stress, great culture, a great team. Wish I'd left earlier, but then I wouldn't have got the payout if I resigned. 4 weeks later, I hear the shit is hitting the fan, and they advertise for a new person for my old role as Noon knows what to do because apparently my job was easy. He didn't even ask me document what I did to hand over to anyone else. So, I liked and remembered the story with the veteran the most. And which one touched you the most? Don't forget to like the video. Until next time.